Alrighty, so for today's topic we have comparing and ordering rational numbers. Make sure to put your name and the date. And really we're just building off what we did last class, which was we were just ordering numbers in scientific notation. Well, now we're including fractions, decimals, and percents as well. And so I meant to write the steps up above the first problem, but I forgot, so I just wrote them here just to make sure that they were on the page. Feel free to, pause the video, make sure you get all this stuff written down, like copy down the first problem and your steps. Which the steps, there's only two. We need to turn everything into decimal form. So for example, using the first problem, this guy's already a decimal, so he's good. Where's my thumbs up? He's good. This guy's in scientific notation. I need to put him in standard form. This guy's in percent form. I need to turn it to a decimal. And this is a fraction. I also need to turn it to a decimal. Then I can compare the decimals, just going one place value at a time, and order them appropriately. So here we're going from least to greatest, which is also called ascending order, going least to greatest. So, need to do my first step, turn everything into decimal form. Let's start with our fraction here, 1/8. So to turn a fraction into a decimal, I'm just going to have to kind of do it in the middle of the page. So I'm taking 1/8, I'll draw an arrow. The denominator, the bottom number, goes on the outside. The numerator goes on the inside. We have to ask ourselves, how many times does 8 go into 1? Well, it doesn't, so 0. Put a decimal. So now we're going to the 10th spot. And anytime I move over a place value, I have to put a 0 next to my number here. Now how many times does 8 go into 10? Well, that's once. And what is 8 times 1? Well, that's 8. So now I subtract these two numbers, and I get 2. Once again, now I'm moving to my hundredths place, my next place value, so I have to put a 0 on that too. We have to ask ourselves, how many times does 8 go into 20? The answer is twice. And what is 8 times 2? Well, that's 16. We subtract 20 minus 16, that's 4. Now I'm going to my thousandths place. Got to put a 0. How many times does 8 go into 40? 8, 16, 24, 32, 40. 5 times. 8 times 5 is 40. Subtract and we have 0. So this is 1/8 written in decimal form. 0.125. Okay, now let's bring 18%, put it in decimal form. This one isn't too bad. Anytime you have a percent, first off, you need to identify if there's a decimal. There is no decimal in this percent. So anytime there's no decimal, aka it's a whole number, the decimal is really back here behind the last digit. And for percent, we have to move this decimal twice to the left to get it into decimal form. So it was here, now I'm moving it twice, and now it's in front of the 1. So that becomes 0.18, and I can put a 0 out in front. So 0.18, that's 18% in decimal form. So this is my second guy. Alrighty. Now 1.8 times 10 to the negative 4. Sorry, this is a little sloppy. So let's say you always look at the digits, which is just 1.8, and you use the exponent on your power of 10 here to determine how many times you need to move this decimal. This negative 4 means I need to move this decimal 4 times. The question is just which direction, left or right? And the answer is left. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now in all these spaces where there's nothing in them, that was just an accidental dot there. But all these spaces where there's nothing in them, put zeros. So you get 0.00018, and we stick a 0 out in front. So this is 1.8 times 10 to the negative 4th written in decimal form. And once again, 1.8 was already in decimal form. So now we just compare these four numbers, one place value at a time. So we start with the 1 spot. This has a 0 in the 1 spot. Oh, I should say, since we're going from least to greatest, we want to find out which one's the smallest first. This one has a 0 in the 1 spot. This has a 0 in the 1 spot. 0 in the 1 spot. This one has a 1 in the 1 spot. And 1 is bigger than 0. So this one is definitely not the smallest. It's actually the biggest. But we're looking for the least right now. So now we just need to compare these three numbers. Go to your next place value, the tenths. This has a 1 in the 10th spot. This has a 1 in the 10th spot. This one has a 0. So 0 is less than 1. So this guy right here, 0.00018, is our smallest number. So I have to write that first. And I wish I had left myself enough room to do this. Okay, I'm just going to put my answer over here and kind of make it go left to right the best that I can. So instead of writing 0.00018, I actually write its original form. 1.8 times 10 to the negative 4 is my first number because it's the smallest number out of these four. Now I need to determine which of these two is my second smallest because we already said both of them are smaller than this one. So they both had a 1 in their 10th place. Now we got to go to the 100th place. 2, 8. 2 is smaller than 8. So that means the 0.125 is my second smallest, but we need to write it in its original form, 1/8. Okay, third, we got 0.18. That's smaller than 1.8. So we got 18% comes next. And lastly, we have 1.8, which is our largest number, least to greatest. And there you have it. There, right there, is your final answer. Least to greatest. All right, now we got to go the other direction. We got to go greatest to least, which is called descending order. Descending order. Okay, same two steps. Oops. Turn everything into a decimal, and then compare the decimals and order them appropriately. This time we're going greatest to least. Okay, so start with our fraction here, 2/3. Denominator goes on the outside, numerator goes on the inside. 3 does not go into 2, so I put a 0. Anytime I'm going to my next place value, got to put a 0 on that number. 3 goes into 26 times without going over. And 3 times 6 is 18. Then we subtract, and we get 2. Oh, wait. If I keep going with this, well, I would have to put another 0. 3 goes into 26 times. Okay, 3 times 6 is 18. I subtract. Then I get 2 again. And the reality is that we would just keep going. We'd do 0, 6, 18, subtract 2, which means that it's a repeating decimal. It never ends. So 2/3 is 0.6666666 forever, forever, forever. So what we do is we put this little line above a 6. We call it a hat. Put the little hat above the 6, and that tells the reader, hey, this goes on forever. Okay, so this is 2/3 written in decimal form. Let's do 23%. So 23, once again, is a whole number, so there is no decimal that's visible. So it's really invisible in behind the 3. And what we need to do is move it twice. Once, twice. And we get 0.23. Tack on a 0 out in front. So 0.23 is 23% written in decimal form. Move on to our scientific notation. 2.3 times 10 squared. So I usually bring down my digits here, and then I use the exponent to move my decimal a certain amount of times. In the previous problem, we moved it 4 times to the left because it's -4. This time, it's +2. So I actually need to move it twice, but this time to the right. And anytime you have an empty hump right there, you put a 0. So this written in decimal form, which is just standard form, is 230. Alright, and then this guy, 0.0023, already in decimal form. So these are the 4 numbers I need to compare. Well, first off, I need to find the biggest number, the greatest number. 230 is definitely bigger than 0.23, 0.66666, 0.0023, because these numbers aren't even as big. These aren't even one whole. This is 230. So I write 2.3 times 10 to the second power. That's my biggest number, which remember you always have to write it in its original form. Now I need to compare the rest. So they all have zeros in their one spot. 0, 0, 0, got to move to the tenths. 6, 2, and 0. 6 is my second biggest number. So that means 2/3 is larger than the other two. So that comes next. Now it's just down to these two. This has a 2 in its 10th spot. This has a 0. So 0.23 is bigger, which was 23%. And then lastly, we have our decimal, 0.0023. And that is your final answer. Turning everything into decimals, then putting them in order.